Hi, and welcome back to the HSP Connection. This is where we share our stories, insights, and strategies to help fellow highly sensitive people navigate their own path to living a meaningful life. We're on a mission to reclaim the word sensitive and help the world see the strength in sensitivity. So today, any of you watching on YouTube will see that it's just me, not Robbie, but it's not just me because I have a wonderful guest here. I have Amy Stein. Now, I recorded a podcast with Amy back in, we've just worked it out, November 2022. So it's wonderful to have this opportunity to record with Amy again. And Amy, welcome this time to the HSP Connection podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. And of course, you're an HSP,
Yes.
which is why you came on Meeting of Minds before, because you came in the season where I was talking to HSPs.
Mm-hmm.
And in that episode, we talked about your plant medicine work, which is, and if anybody wants to hear that conversation, I will link it. It's something like episode 78 or something, but I will link it in the show notes if you want to go and listen to the previous conversation that Amy and I have had, because today I asked Amy to come and talk about something else she does, very related, but something else, which is breathwork. But before we get into that, Amy, could you tell us a little bit more about you so that the listeners can get to know you?
Sure. So I live in New York. And as you said, I met you when I was on your podcast in 2022. And I am a fellow HSP. I did not understand what that meant for most of my life, most of my childhood, like other fellow HSPs. The irony is that the doctor who discovered it, Dr. Elaine Aaron, was married to my boss, who I did research with for years in college. And I had no idea that she was doing this research in California. I just knew he spent 6 months out of the year there. So it was like I had such blinders on to keep myself in survival, to stay protected in my little bubble, because I was so overwhelmed by life that I could not manage. And so I was not aware of really a lot of things that were going on around me if it didn't affect me personally in a way that I could handle. And so I think this speaks to the power of the protection mechanisms that live inside of us, and how we don't understand how much they actually can control a lot of our behavior and patterns of action. And so it wasn't until I was working with chronic pain patients in my late 20s that I began to resemble my geriatric patients, that I could no longer ignore the symptoms from my body. So my whole childhood, I was, not seen, heard, or believed by medical professionals, adults, caregivers. And so I shut a lot of that down because I could not go through life surviving and also paying attention to all of these messages from my body. And the messaging I received was my body was broken. There was something wrong with me. I was too sensitive. And so this created this persona of that I had to develop in order to survive the world. And so my world kind of crumbled late 20s, early 30s. I'd just been married, and everything fell apart. And it was very abrupt and it was very sudden, but it actually wasn't. It just seemed that way because the messages had been happening, the symptoms had been happening my whole life. It just got to the point where I became bedridden. I could no longer work. I couldn't leave the house, that I had to actually pay attention to what was going on. So I put my researcher hat on. I had been doing research at that time for over a decade. Now it's been over 2 decades. And I had to figure out what was happening. And I didn't stumble upon HSP information until a little bit further down the line. And then once I did, I thought, how did I not know this before? I worked with Dr. Aaron. I did not know his wife, Elaine, was doing this work. How could I have not been aware of this? And I think it's, like I said, it speaks to that survival aspect. It speaks to that part of you, keeping you protected, keeping you safe, because that's all the body's concerned with.
Yeah, I so recognize that protector part that you're talking about, that keeps a lot of things away from our consciousness because we don't have the bandwidth, the capacity, the energy, the insight, all of those things. And we're not going to have the insight because it's keeping it away from us. But it is trying to protect us by keeping us in a bubble. But that bubble, as you said, yes, that bubble of survival is what's needed at a time. But then we get to a point where we're not in that, like, we're not really still in whatever it is we need sort of protecting from, but we're still doing it. And then it just sort of, it becomes very
all consuming.
Yeah, and not useful. That's not really the word I want to use, but it's really not, not useful, is it? So so thank you for sharing that with us. You've had quite a journey, I know. So your business is now, am I right, part function, I mean they kind of go together, but functional medicine, plant medicine, yeah.
So it's health coaching. Yeah, it's health coaching that involves plant medicine, it involves energy medicine, and it involves breath work, because I call it mind, body, spirit, breath, because it brings all four aspects together to address wholeness in the body, right? We're not just a system of parts. We actually are a whole system that is related and works together. But because we're not taught these things in school, we don't understand how the body works. And because modern day Western medicine treats you as a system of parts, you don't understand how everything is related. And so again, the body is designed to heal, but it's also designed to keep you safe. So it can't do both at the same time. So it's always going to preface keeping you alive before healing. That's just the way it works. And so when you are stuck in this functional freeze state of a learned behavior that was created in childhood, right, to keep you safe, it creates disease and it creates pain and symptoms, and it leads to this trajectory of where I was, where nothing I did worked, right? Not understanding that the standardized Western medical model, it does not look at the person as an individual. I didn't yet understand that. And so when I wasn't responding to the typical protocols, I was viewed as a non-compliant patient. But it's so much more complicated than that, but it also can be much easier than that. In that when we look at the person as unique with unique experiences, it's a whole system of, that is interrelated as a system that is designed to keep you safe, but also designed to keep you heal. A lot of the experiences then begin to make sense. And so the approach that I use is breathwork allows for curiosity. It also allows for that connection back to all parts of yourself. So a lot of times HSPs and those with chronic pain and chronic disease don't want to be in the physical body. It's too overwhelming. It's too stimulating. They just want to break. So they will choose to escape out, right? They will numb out. They will choose these other protectors that, again, were formed in childhood, an addict behavior, with no numbing out with social media, with drugs, with alcohol, with shopping. Also be someone that plays the victim. It's everyone else's fault. It's not mine, right? And then I don't have to take responsibility. I don't have to take action on my behavior. Again, it's not something that that you're consciously doing. These are unconscious parts of the body that are designed to keep you safe in childhood from the experiences that you had. And again, I'm sure a lot of listeners know, like, the body does not understand if you're not in the moment of still having that experience occur. So something that could have happened to you at 7, the body doesn't understand it's not still happening. So that protector is an unconscious rote behavior that comes on. So if something happens that's similar, that protector is going to come on. So you're going to aggress. You're going to be the victim. You're going to choose addiction. You're going to choose to disassociate and numb out. You're going to choose to, be the comic relief. I did that a lot too. Like, oh, if I can make jokes, I can control the situation. You might be the control freak, right? You might try to control. Yeah, me too. That type A personality that you think you control everything in your life, because control, the body equates with safety. Predictable behavior, the body likes. It likes that Groundhog's Day of like, oh, we know exactly what's going to happen every single day, at what time, wherever we go. It loves that. It does not like uncertainty. It does not like, things that change. And this is why it's hard to break patterns. This is why it's hard to break habits. This is why it's hard to try all these protocols and they don't work, because when we don't understand how the body is designed, we're actually working against it with all these things. And I talk about this in my upcoming self-help book, this idea of manic healing, in that we try to do everything in our head. We try to create all of these, we'll just, rewire our brain with neuroplasticity. We'll do our affirmation work. We'll tell ourselves it's fine. We'll tell ourselves it's safe. again, when you don't understand how the body works, the body will know that you're not believing that. It will call bullshit. It's like, you're lying. This is not true. We're not going to integrate this. We're not going to have this protocol work. We're not going to allow this implementation to occur. And so when we don't understand that, we become really frustrated. Then that causes a form of resistance, and that causes the symptoms to escalate. That causes us to want to burrow in more, causes us not to want to be around people, not to want to be triggered, not to want to, don't ask me questions, don't answer me, leave me alone, right? And this is all, when you don't understand it, it seems very confusing and like there's something wrong with you, because again, when you're 20% of the population, you're singled out, that this is not, and safety, everyone wants to belong. And so when you don't feel safe, the body starts to rev everything up. And then you become stuck in these functional freeze states where you automatically respond, react in the exact same way. There is no conscious thought process occurring. And so this is what breathwork does. It interrupts all of that without having to name an agenda, without having to retell a story. This is not talk therapy. We don't have to relive what happened. All you have to do is intentionally breathe. And that's why I use it as a cornerstone of my approach, because it's so powerful. And we're not aware of the power that exists there because we hold our breath, to not feel our sensations, not feel our emotions. We don't breathe properly. A lot of people breathe in the reverse. They don't actually breathe in the proper way. We take really shallow breaths in order to brace ourselves for impact. But all of these patterns actually hurt the body as a whole and lead to more of what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Wow. I'm mesmerized just listening to you because now I understand a bit more about breath work and a bit more about my healing process. Everything that you're talking about makes complete sense. I'm just trying to think back to sort of like 7 years ago, me. I think I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'd be curious, I'm sure, but I'd be like, what are you talking about? I just don't get any of this. So I love that you've come on here to talk to us about this, because I just think it's really important. Breathwork's played actually a really quite big part in my healing journey, which is why I wanted to talk to you about breathwork. But just going back, I just think it's really important to note what you were talking about largely Western medicine. It's a sticking plaster, isn't it? It's not looking at the whole. It's just looking at the symptom in isolation and what can we do? What pill can we give you? What that protocol you're talking about? What can we do to deal with that one symptom, as opposed to what is your life like as a whole? What's your history? What what other symptoms have you got? And actually looking at it holistically, because that tells a much bigger story, individualized story, doesn't it? Rather than, oh, well, other people who present with this is what we've given them. Yeah, but this is me, and my story is going to be very different to somebody else's. So I love that. I'm not anti-Western medicine at all. I
am.
Well, okay. I am a little bit, but I'm not
unless
really.
Emergency situation, unless you cut your arm off. But for chronic disease and chronic pain, it doesn't, like I said, it only looks at the physical and the mental.
Yeah.
So it doesn't address that, illness and disease occurs on all levels: the spiritual, the emotional, the mental, the physical, and the energetic. And so if you're missing those aspects, you will never fully heal. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. It's got to be all aspects, hasn't it? So, could you give us just a little insight into what you mean by breathwork? I know what I mean, but you're the expert here. What do you mean when you talk about breathwork?
So I'm just going to preface this that I do not do William Hoff breathing. Like, there is no hyperventilating. There is no extravagant activating breath. The reason is because I'm trauma informed. So I do not want to inflict more trauma on somebody else, because if I don't know their history, or I do know their history, that's the whole point of being trauma informed, is that the participants' safety, support, and comfort is paramount to anything that I want to do. And so, breathwork has become popular, but a lot of what has become popular is people want to feel something. I want to feel it happening. I want to feel like I'm hyperventilating. I want to feel like I'm going to pass out because then I know it's working. So that's that more is better idea, but
Yeah.
it's not true for healing. Less is more. And so my approach is very different. It is a very slow, deep, relaxing state. Like a lot of my clients say they feel like they're being hypnotized. I'm like, well, I'm not a hypnosis. Like I don't have any skill set in that, but they said it's so relaxing that they can just drop in. So I use binaural beats and hertz frequencies when I do my playlist because it allows for, especially if the breather is a little reluctant, right? So again, me 10 years ago, I've been like, breathwork that's crazy. But it's an proven ancient healing technology that's still around because it exists. And even with having experience with breathwork, with yoga, I was vain. I didn't want to have a belly. So I was still not doing deep breathing. I was doing it, to stay in shape for the 6-pack abs. I wasn't doing it for the spiritual aspect, for the regeneration aspect, for the healing aspect. So when I came back to breath work years later, I still had this thought in the back of my head, like, how can something so simple work? Right? Because we think healing has to be complicated, it has to be hard. And so when I didn't feel anything, I thought, well, nothing's happening. And so as my clients are doing breath work, again, I use it as a cornerstone to allow for curiosity because a lot of the people I work with are like me. They're going to question everything. How can this be true? How can this work? They've gone through a lot of different protocols that haven't worked. How can something simple as just breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth make a difference? And so what happens when I use it in this session initially, before we talk about anything else, is it allows the connection back into the body to the innate wisdom that lives there, that is also mirrored in Mother Earth, which is why I bring in, Mother Nature and the plants, because it's also a powerful part of my approach. And it allows for this thought process of, what else could be possible? What else could I be open to? What else could I not, be listening to my body? And so what happens, even for the people who are skeptical, right? Like I've read a lot of skeptics and they're like, oh my God, I've never felt that way before. People who have done hallucinogenics, I've never felt that way before, and I've done hallucinogenics. Yeah, because the power of your body is so incredible. But we're not taught about it. We're not taught to revere and respect it like past civilizations have done. There's no more ritual. There's no more reverence about the body and what it can do. Ancient medicine has talked about so many different things that modern day medicine still has not caught up to. And so there's still this stigma of, oh, this isn't real. This doesn't actually work. And I'm trying to break that stigma to let people know that this is something that's always available. It's free. It's not a new skill you have to learn, right? You can do it anywhere you are, not driving, not operating heavy machinery. But when I'm in traffic, so I live in New York, like there's traffic 24/7, regardless, no matter what day of the week, what time of day. So I will turn to breath and I will do it to calm the road rage, to not be as triggered or activated. Do I do it all of the time? No, because I don't always think of it because I'm human, but it's another tool in your toolbox that you don't have to go somewhere else to learn, right? It's just something that's always accessible.
Yeah. And I love that you bring it back to the basics, really. It's not, you're not doing this. I agree with you. There's a lot of this fancy hyperventilating or all those sort of breath work sessions around. And, perhaps there is a place for those too. But, breathing is something that we do every day. Of course we do, because we have to say that
you wouldn't live otherwise.
And that's our ultimate sort of survival pattern, isn't it?
Right.
Breathing is the real basic. So if we can work on doing the best breathing that we can, then that's a really great place to start, isn't it? And
it is.
I remember, I was probably around about 50. And I was like, well, gosh, I've lived for 50 years. I got breathing, haven't I? Surely I know how to breathe. And it's like, no, you don't know at all, because especially, people who've experienced trauma. And I'm glad you mentioned being trauma informed. So it is really important, if one has experienced trauma, to make sure you're working with a trauma informed facilitator. And so I had a lot of childhood trauma, didn't recognize that's what it was at the time. Now know it was. And I think as HSPs, I mean, I have yet to meet an HSP. I mean, I'm hoping I will do one day. I think they're going to be a lot younger than me, but I have yet to meet an HSP who has been brought up by parents who understand their high sensitivity, who nurture it, who cherish them for it, and who really support them to be who they are. I mean, that will happen one day. I don't yet know that person. So if anybody's listening to this and you are that person, please get in touch with me and tell me, because that will just sort of, my heart will really love to hear about that. So most of us do not grow up in those, in that sort of environment. So whether you recognize it as trauma, whether you want to call it trauma or you want to call it something else, it is very likely that you have experienced the things going on in your body that are causing you to not breathe in the optimal way for your body to function properly, to get everything moving around your body in the way that it needs to. So it's likely that it's having an effect on other parts of your body.
Yeah, because it's all connected. And I just want to preface that a little bit and go back to, again, even if you think you didn't have big T trauma, right? So there's little T trauma and big T trauma. What your body dictates as trauma, you have no control over.
Exactly.
So it's not logical. Just like healing, it's not logical. So it looks different for everybody. So what you think may happen to you was not traumatic. You don't know if the body stored a trauma pathway about that experience, or it could be an experience you don't even remember, and there's trauma pathways on it. So this is why I think breathwork is important for everybody, regardless. But I do it in a trauma-informed lens because I want to be careful not to inflict more trauma, because I want to make sure that everybody is seen, heard, and believed and supported in their individual experience, right? Like every session looks different. It's based upon the individual. Every session they do with me looks different. And that's because once you do the breath work and you allow the mind to rest, the body can then turn on the healing state. So then that past trauma pathways that create energy blockages, which lead to pain, disease, and illness, can be released, can be let go by the body. And then that energy can move again. So energy is just like water and electricity. It needs to move. And when you have blockages and dams, it creates problems. And so breath work allows all this to happen just by intentional breathing. And you get to choose, so any invitation I make in a session, I always preface it by saying, this is if it feels good to you. This is not a mandatory. This is not a necessary. You get to control the speed, the depth, the intensity of what happens. You get to choose if you want to do a breath hold. You get to choose if you want to increase your breath, if you want to do an activating pattern. And when we do activating patterns, it's for 20 seconds. So a lot of times what I encourage more is to make noise, because there are no rules in breath work. It's not meditation. It's meditation for people who can't meditate, is what my teacher would say. And so I was that person who couldn't meditate, and I thought there was something wrong with me. But then the more trauma research I did, I realized it was my body protecting me, because I didn't have the support, didn't have the coping skills, and I didn't have the ability yet to deal with my trauma. And so my body was protecting me by not letting me meditate, because it wasn't safe to do that. So it wasn't means I was broken. It didn't mean that. It just meant my body was protecting me. Again, we have all these protectors. We have multiple of them. It's not a mental illness. It's something that your body is designed with to keep you safe in childhood. But as an adult, it can keep you stuck in pain, disease, and patterns that may not be healthy. And so when you allow the breath to actually come in the body, again, letting go of the judgments, letting go of the expectations, the agenda, the shoulds, what it's supposed to look like. And that's what I'm there for, to encourage you, to remind you to let go of the judgment, let go of the expectation. And this is why throughout the session, I will talk and coach you through. And again, you may not actually be consciously aware of what I'm saying, but because you're in that state of a different awareness, you can accept it more so than if you're trying to do affirmations. The body's like, no, I don't believe you. You're not actually believing what you're saying. The body actually accepts it and integrates it because you're in a deeper state of awareness. You're in a deeper state of healing. And that's what's so impactful, is you're really not doing anything other than breathing, but you're giving yourself that time to transition out of that functional freeze state back into a healing state.
Yeah. And Wow. Uh, yeah. And I think that's why having support when you're doing it, so working with somebody like you, is really important, actually, because I mean, I did a bit of breath work by myself to start off with. That's when I learned I wasn't breathing deeply, and we'll come on to it in a minute about the main things that people perhaps are not doing in their breathing that is maybe keeping it stuck. But I did that by myself, and I found that really useful, actually, to learn that, to practice that way of deep breathing. And I have found that to be a real tool for me in moments of overwhelm and when I just need to take a moment and, gather myself back together again. I found that really important. But then also I went at the weekend to a 5-hour facilitated breathwork session. And that was really, I loved that because it was a mixture of theory and practical. It was a lot of practical. It was three different breathing techniques. But because I'd put myself in that place of wanting to learn, of leaving everything else behind me and wanting to be there and feeling really supported by these two women who were running the workshop, it just, I don't know, it just went a lot deeper. It just, and yes, we can do a lot. We're doing a whole season talking about healing modalities, and some of them we can do by ourselves. But equally, I do think for the real deep work, it's really important to have support from wonderful people, like you, who can guide you and be there for your particular journey with whatever, with the breath work is what we're talking about here. And I think you've done a wonderful job of explaining like the benefits of it. Thank you. Hi, if you're enjoying listening to this podcast, have you thought about joining our HSP Connection community for more connection with other HSPs? Because really, us HSPs thrive in the community of others.
Absolutely. And Philippa and I have created this space on an online platform where we can connect with each other deeply. We can have these awesome conversations, and we would love to get to know you over there in that space.
We would. So if you're interested and want to join straight away, there's a link in the show notes. And if you'd like to have a chat with either of us beforehand, please reach out. Now, back to the episode. So what are the main things that you find? I know this is a massive generalization, but can you give us a few pointers that you find with most people, things that they are doing with their breathing that they might not realize that they're doing?
Yeah, so some people breathe in reverse. So when you inhale properly, your belly should inflate, right? So your belly should inflate. The diaphragm is a balloon. It should actually expand. So a lot of people, they breathe in reverse. So when they inhale, their belly actually goes in. But when you exhale is when your belly should contract, constrict as you breathe out. And a lot of times people hold their breath, right? So even if you're not an HSP, if you just live in the chaotic world we live in, like you're going to hold your breath because you're triggered by the news and social media and whatever happens when you leave the house or don't leave the house, right? So you don't want to feel it. So your natural instinct is to constrict, is to go within, to protect yourself, and you're going to hold your breath or you're going to breathe shallow. And when you do that, again, it creates a whole nother level of resistance in the body. You're not getting enough oxygen or carbon dioxide to all the parts of the body that are needed to work properly. So then, your blood may not pump as well. It may not be the rich red color it needs to be because it's not well oxygenated. Then you may have issues with lung, and you might have stomach aches because you're holding your breath, right? So then it goes somewhere else because the energy is trapped, right? It may cause more pain. So when we choose to not feel our emotions or sensations, because it's a choice, we don't realize it, but it is a choice, we create that stuck energy, which leads to more pain, more disease, more overwhelm. But when you can take the time to have an awareness of when something is happening, and just stop and take 3 deep breaths and see where you experience it in your body, right? So like this in theory sounds really simple, but do people actually do it? Like people will say to me, that's really simple. I say, have you done it before? Let's do it on the call, right? Like, let's do it now. And they're like, wow, I can feel that. Yeah, that's the difference that makes. So and a lot of times I found this even with myself is we don't understand the whole breadth of emotions and sensations that can exist in the body because we have like 4 that we concentrate on, right? Like anger, overwhelmed, anxious, sad, like that's it. So in the healing journal that I just published on Sunday, it talks about there's a feeling wheel and it will tell you like all of the different emotions, not all of them, but I didn't want to overwhelm people, but like there's 10 different emotions of what anger could actually be.
Yeah.
There's 10 different emotions of what sad could be. There's 10 different emotions of what overwhelmed could be. So you can see like which one actually am I feeling? Because a lot of people will say I'm really anxious. I'm like, but that's not actually a feeling. That's a sensation.
Yeah.
So what is causing that sensation? What is the feeling that is represented with it? And so in the journal, there's 4 simple prompts to like be a companion guide with you through the process. As you take your deep breaths, what am I feeling? Let me look at my feeling wheel. Where do I feel that in the body? What is the sensation that's coming up? And is there an intuitive thought that comes through? Because a lot of times the body will just randomly send you something and you'll be like, that's weird. I have this idea, but it's so unrelated. And the body's like, it's not, pay attention to it. And that's why we think the body speaks another language because we haven't been taught these coping skills. We haven't been taught these exercises. And that's also why when I do breath with people, I invite them to vocalize because a lot of times we don't know what the word is, but we can make a sound. So you could make a sound, Peter Levine does the voo sound, voo, and you can feel that in the body.
Yeah.
And at the same time that you're doing the breath work and making the sound, you're stimulating the vagus nerve again, and that reaches all of the organs. So you're allowing healing to now happen. And that thing is you can go back and forth easier. You're not stuck in that frozen freeze state as much. You can transition a little bit easier and you don't feel so overwhelmed the more that you do these somatic based practices like breath work. And so to me, I try to make it as easy as possible because I know what it's like.
Yep.
And I know how people don't want another thing on their to-do list. So it can be 5 minutes. Like the free gift I have is a guided session. I think it's 15 minutes long. You can feel something in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 15 minutes, right? It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be 5 hours. It's great when you can get those immersive experiences, like it's a bonus, right? But that's not always practical for everyday life. And so when you can take that time to do intentional breathing, maybe you set an alarm, you do it in the morning when you wake up before you get out of bed or in the shower, you do it before lunchtime. That actually helps with your digestion as well. You do it before dinner. Again, it helps with digestion. Maybe you do it at bedtime. Movement is great. So you can incorporate movement into it. I do my Qigong practice with breath, and it enhances the ability of any other practice that you're doing it. It enhances the healing. So it's not something that is difficult. But again, it's that awareness of what can I do to help myself in the moment? How can I make it easier on myself?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You're obviously, it is simple and powerful, but you have to do it.
That's the hard part.
It is. And actually, it's really interesting because just before we started recording, we were talking about definition of success. So that's a completely different conversation. But it's all like, the definition of, not necessarily the definition of breathing, but it just goes back to how we see things and how we think about things. So it's some people I know I've heard people say, well, that's really simple, isn't it? And like brush it off because it's not hard enough. It's like, but it's so transformative if you can just give it a moment. And when you were talking then and you were saying, you can breathe, in all these places. Yeah, you can also breathe when you're on a podcast listening to your wonderful guest, because I was sitting here breathing down into my belly and really, and I find
grounding into the moment.
Yeah. And if I've got like, I don't know, a sore shoulder or something, I'll breathe right down into my belly and then the breath goes other places and I'll breathe into my shoulder. And it will really help. It's like it just unlocks something. It's ever so subtle, but especially as HSPs, we're going to be able to sense that because we can sense all the subtleties.
Yes.
So I mean, I think breathing is wonderful for everybody, but it's also wonderful for HSPs.
Exactly.
Because it's not overwhelming. It's something that we're doing anyway, but also we get to sense those subtleties, so we can see those, feel those differences quite like quickly, I would have thought, because we just do. We take all the, we take all the data in, and we're going to suddenly feel the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've made me realize that, I mean, I do know that one of the reasons I go cold water swimming now since I spoke to you. Oh, man, I think I might have just started actually when I spoke to you last time. But anyway, and, when it's really cold, especially in the winter, you have to really concentrate on your breath, because the cold water takes your breath away. And I have to really intentionally breathe and keep breathing and just help my body work in the way that it does normally, and give it 2 or 3 minutes. I'm like, oh, it's okay, I'm all right now. But just those 2 or 3 minutes doing that, not only does it help me be in the water, it gives me the breathing practice. So
and it allows you to return to safety in the body. Then the body's not like, oh my God, we're dying, we're gonna die, we're gonna drown. It's like, no, through your breath, you bring safety to the body. You let the body know that it's not in danger. And then the body will begin to relax, and it will transition out of that freeze state into a healing state. And that's what is needed in order to really thrive in the world we live in. So, thousands of years ago, the monks were the ones, and the, shamanic healers were the ones that did breath work. And their world is not as chaotic. And they did it more to connect to intuition, to have, visions come, to have gain insight, to connect to Mother Earth and you can still do that. But what is so great about it is that it's so useful for the chaotic world we live in that it brings you back to an awareness. It brings you back to the now, because it's all that we have. And so rather than future tripping and having more anxiety or, pains of the past and being more depressed, you can bring yourself back to the moment. I'm okay in this moment right now. I'm no longer there. I'm no longer here. I'm just in this moment right now. And so that's what breath is really great for, is it brings you back to the present moment of like, oh, right now I'm okay.
Yeah. And I'm in my body.
Right. And I'm in my physical body. And that's the brilliance of it, is so for so long, when you're living numb from the neck down, you're only in your head and you don't want to feel what's in the physical body. Something as simple as your breath can bring you back in a really easy way, without being overwhelming, without being overstimulating, without being really harsh. If you're doing, a very gentle breath pattern, if you're not doing hyperventilating. I don't want you doing hyperventilating patterns. That's not what the body wants. There's a time and place for it, but ultimately for people who are HSP and trauma informed, I believe that that's not a great approach to use unless it's for very short durations, because the body is already so sensitized and overstimulated, but that a breath pattern like that is going to cause alarm bells to go off in the body. And so even if it feels like nothing is happening, things are happening. And so after sessions, I send emails saying, listen, even though nothing felt like it was happening, I guarantee you something happened. Please drink water, because it's like doing body work. You need to replenish. You need to drink water. You need to rest. If you want to take a bath, use some salts to replenish the minerals. And so just because you don't feel something doesn't mean something isn't happening. And that's really huge with healing too, is because we always think we have to feel something, but the body doesn't work like that.
No. And you make a very good point. You have to, it's a real trust thing, isn't it? You need to be able to trust that something is happening for your good. Something drew you to breath work in the first place. So, trust in that whatever needs to happen is what is happening. And if you don't see anything or feel something in the moment, just trust that whatever needs to happen is happening, and you will work out what that is somewhere along the line, because there always is something changing. You're also reminding me that a lot of the time I say to people, especially when something good has happened, I often say, breathe that in. And because we're talking about breath work, and we're talking about breath work for healing also. I ended up having to explain to somebody what I meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
And they went, yeah, I know you're always saying that. What do you mean? And I said, well, okay, so think about what has happened. Be in that moment. Think about whatever it is you're celebrating or something wonderful that's happened. And as you are thinking about that, just breathe in really deeply, because we're very good at intellectualizing things that have happened, but breathe as you are thinking about it, breathe deeply, as though you're pulling that sensation and those thoughts and all that wonderful celebration down into your body with your breath, because you're then making the connection in your body. And nobody ever really told me to do that. So I think this is my HSP gift coming into play here. Nobody ever really told me to do that, but it felt like the right thing to do, to bring it into my body. And I've just carried on doing that. And I mean, I don't tell people you must breathe that in, but I say, breathe it in. Don't just think about it. Embody it. Embody it.
And it's integrated into the system. Yeah, because that's actually what allows it to actually transform and transmute what is keep holding us back. Yeah, I think it's just such a powerful tool that people can use for so many different things.
It is. And, just as we wrap up now, we've not really got into breathing and breathing patterns and, what they could be. And, if anybody is listening and would like to know more from Amy, please let me know, because if you ask for that, I'll bring Amy back and we can talk about other things in more detail. I mean, both of us can talk, and it's really great to connect and talk about this wonderful topic. So I'm hoping that what we have done is introduced you to the idea of how transformative breathing can be and what you're looking for. I mean, get in touch with Amy, work with Amy. She is wonderful if you want to work with somebody in another time zone, but make sure you're looking for somebody who is trauma informed and who is going to go at a pace that is going to work for you. Because there are a lot of people out there doing much more fast paced, and I'm, that's probably the right thing for some people, but just tune into what is right for you and your body and your experience. And as HSPs, as Amy has said, we're already fairly sensitized and stimulated anyway, with it just on a day-to-day basis. So what we're really looking for is something to
calm the system.
Calm the system, be restorative,
to resource ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So Amy, thank you so much. You did mention your journal, which you have created, that is available on Amazon. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That sounds wonderful. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for anybody who's interested. Go and grab it. I'm sure it's brilliant. And you mentioned a breathwork session.
Yes, the free gift is a guided breathwork session.
Right. Wow. Wonderful. Thank you. So is that something that there's a link to that people automatically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well.
Yes.
Okay. I'll have a look at that. Thank you. Thank you. And you've written a book, which is, I know you're editing at the moment, and that's quite painful. That is a painful
I'm doing a lot of breath work to get me through it.
I bet you are. So I wish you all the best success with that, and let me know when it's available. I would love to know about that. And thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate you giving me and us your time and telling us about this wonderful modality.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you. You are
very welcome. And here I have to lean for my notes to make sure that I don't forget anything. And, keeping it real. So thank you to Amy. That's it for today. Remember, everyone listening and watching, there is great strength in your sensitivity, and the world needs you to be who you are. So for now, it's bye from me, and it's bye from Amy.
Thanks for listening to HSP Connection. If you've enjoyed listening, we'd love you to hit the follow or subscribe button, as this helps other people find us. And it also means you won't miss an episode.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate the podcast and share it with anyone you think might be interested. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave us a review.
To get in touch with us, you can email us at hspconnectionpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you with your thoughts and comments on the episodes, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests.
We are both HSP coaches and speakers. And to find out more about Robbie, go to robbielee, leigh.com.
And to find out more about Philippa, go to boldhsp.com. See you next time.